Reverend clergy, dignitaries representing the republics of Armenia and the Republic of Korea, fellow public servants, honored guests, my dear friends and residents of Glendale. I am Ardashes Kasakyan, and I am proud to call myself the mayor of Glendale, California, your mayor. I, along with my colleagues here today, Council members Zara Nazarian, Paula Devine, Vrej Jarajanyan, and Dan Brotman, join our residents and friends of Armenian descent in solidarity on this day of solemn remembrance. After a long hiatus, we welcome all of you back to the Alex Theater for the city's annual event commemorating the anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. This event would not have been possible were it not for a number of people who worked tirelessly to make it possible. Some of them are listed in your program. They include the committee members, Christine Arakhani, Armi Kavedisyan, Hasmik Burushian, Arlet Derhovanesyan, Solin Manukyan, Ara Oshagan, Christine Powers, David Samuelian, Antanik Torosyan, Patrick Varon, Miles Williams, and Nora Yakubian. But there's also someone else we'd like to recognize, and that is the late Ara Ahoronyan, who was part of this committee from its inception, and whom we lost last year. Now, I'd like to thank the staff of the Alex Theater and our city staff members, two of whom I already mentioned, Christine Babumian Powers and Solin Manukyan, for their hard work, and their work would not be possible without our city manager, Mr. Rubik Kolanyan. So thank you. Give them all a round of applause. I would like to also thank our performers this evening. This evening obviously would not be possible without their contribution, especially without the great maestro Vache Barsumyan and Lark board, yes. And Lark board chairman Andy Torosyan and his wife Heidi Torosyan. Thank you all. I would now like to introduce this program's committee co-chair, Ms. Sevana Zadorian.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sevana Zadorian, and I'm a member of the City of Glendale's Arts and Culture Commission and co-chair for tonight's event. First, I'd like to thank Mayor Kasakyan for requesting that the Arts and Culture Commission work with city staff and our committee members in organizing this program. I would also like to thank Lark Musical Society for collaborating with the city and making this event and evening a truly special one. Tonight, you'll experience the combined vision of our mayor and of Lark Music, a vision which will elevate us and transport us to a place beyond this hall and promote human rights and social justice through the powerful medium of music. To Armenians, Komitas is a very familiar name, but to some of you joining us tonight, he may not be familiar at all. Gomidas was born Soghomon Soghomonian, a young orphan whose talent was recognized at an early age. He entered the seminary and was ordained with the name Komitas as a priest in the Armenian church. Among Armenian musicians and musicologists at the turn of the century, Komitas was a towering figure, an artist, who in a span of about 20 years discovered, preserved, and transformed the rich cultural heritage of Armenian song that had existed since the earliest times. Like his people, Gomidas had to drink from the bitter cup of suffering during the early years of the 20th century. He shared the fate of so many of his people, forced eviction from his homeland, torture in foreign exile, and the threat of death. These experiences eventually broke his mind, despite interventions by his friends and the foreign intermediaries who had helped secure his freedom. He unfortunately lived out his last 20 years without productivity as a patient in asylums in Constantinople and Paris. Tonight, we bring you his music to remind you that genocide is not just the act of eradicating human lives. Attempts to destroy an entire race or group of people are not characterized simply by the murder of the physical self, but instead the additional erasure of their memory, of their art and the legacy of their culture. Today, we celebrate survival in the struggle for justice by listening to and taking part in that which was almost lost. Thank you.
Before we introduce our special guests and have some words from them, and as well as recognizing some of the very important friends of the Armenian community and members of our community here in Glendale that have joined us, I would like to ask everyone to stand with me and observe a moment of silence for the 1.5 million voices that were silenced during the period of the Armenian Genocide, and the 4,000 young, brave souls who perished just most recently during the Azerbaijani attacks on the peaceful Armenian people of Artsakh. Thank you. You may be seated. Now, you are all very important and dear to me and to our city, and we have many of our public servants and leaders here. But I would like to give special acknowledgement to a few individuals who have joined us here this evening, including our own Congressman Adam Schiff, Minister, you may applaud. Minister Consular Nelly Saroyan, Consulate General of Armenia in Los Angeles. Consul Daewon Kim, Korean Consulate of the Republic of Korea in Los Angeles. Former West Hollywood Mayor and Los Angeles County Assessor Jeffrey Prang. Senator Anthony Portantino, representing the 25th Senate District of California. Assemblymember Laura Friedman, representing the 43rd Assembly District of California. Assemblymember Adrian Nazarian, representing the 46th Assembly District of California. Assemblymember Wendy Carrillo, representing the 51st Assembly District of California. From right here in Glendale, we have representatives and elected officials from our Glendale Unified School District with us. We have the Superintendent of Public Education, Dr. Vivian Ekchian, and the elected board members of our Glendale Unified School District, Ms. Nairi Nahabedian, Dr. Armine Garpetian, and Mr. Greg Krikorian. From Glendale Community College, we are pleased to be joined by Superintendent Dr. David Vyar and his wife, Jane, who is also a member of the Arts and Culture Commission, my appointee, as well as by Community College Board of Trustees member Ann Ransford and former trustee Anita Quinones-Gabrielian. We have also with us current city treasurer and former mayor and city council member of Glendale, Rafi Manukyan, city clerk Aram Ajemian, and former mayors of the city of Glendale, Frank Quintero and Vartan Garbetian. If I missed anyone, I apologize. You're all very important. Give all of yourselves a big round of applause. A few of our dignitaries will share a brief message with us this evening. But unlike in years prior, our intention is not to inundate you with speeches this evening. They have all assured us that they will speak briefly but meaningfully. This evening, As Ms. Zadorian stated, music will speak for itself, and it will lift our hearts and souls. For those who are so moved and wish to channel their emotions into action after this evening, we recommend visiting the websites of the Armenian National Committee of America and the Armenian Assembly of America, where you can learn more about what is happening in Armenia and Artsakh today and ways that you can help. Allow me to reiterate that this evening's program will be a departure from our events in the past and will have a focus on only music, and specifically with the music of Gomidas. Music connects us all. And as was mentioned, genocide is not just the erasure of our people or any people, but of all that those people have created and would have created had they never been subjugated to such horrors. As the city commemorates the martyrs of the Armenian Genocide of 1915 and the Turkish persecution of the Armenians prior to that calamity, including the continued persecution of Armenians today in Artsakh by the Azeri and Turkish combined forces, we must remember that justice denied and justice deferred is only an invitation for more injustice to occur around the world. We must therefore always acknowledge and speak the truth of history and even our own truths. We must remember the Armenians, just as we remember the native people of this land we call America, whose homes and culture was destroyed, the Jewish people who were victims of the Holocaust during World War II, the Cambodians, the Herero people of Namibia, Africa, and the Rwandan genocide, just to name a few. To name a few. Sounds awful to say that, especially when we are supposed to have been so advanced and enlightened by now as a race, as a species. Yet people still will hurt each other for the most trivial reasons and out of absolute ignorance. But there is hope. Hope sprung from the fact that we are able to come together after a pandemic, after the attacks on the people of Artsakh, and even now as war continues to rage on in far-off places. We come together to take a moment, to take stock of what has passed, what we have survived, and to reaffirm that we will all work towards making the world a better and safer place. The fact that you are here with us this evening, listening to Gomidas' music performed by people of all ages, is proof that the Turkish authorities who tried to destroy the Armenian people have failed, and we must all work as one to ensure that their renewed attempts are unsuccessful as well. More importantly, we hope the music stays with you well beyond this evening and becomes the sound that reminds us all of what was, what is, and what could still be if we all work together to restore justice to all oppressed peoples and make the world a better place for everyone. Աստված մեր նահատակներուն հոգին լուսավոր է եւ միշտ վարպահ է. Thank you. With these words, I would like to invite to our stage here at the Alex to share a few words with us, with you, someone well known for his pursuit of justice for the Armenian Genocide, Congressman Adam Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Honored clergy, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be with you this evening and to be joined by two of my wonderful colleagues that I share in representing the City of Glendale with Laura Friedman and Anthony Portantino. I want to thank them for being such tremendous partners and leaders on the subject of genocide recognition and fighting against all forms of hate and bigotry. As we gather in person again this evening, I want to extend my thanks to the Glendale City Council, the City of Glendale leadership and staff, and the Armenian Genocide Commemorative Event Committee. 107 years ago, the Ottoman Empire undertook a systematic effort to destroy the Armenian people, ultimately murdering 1.5 million innocent men, women, and children in what became the first genocide of the last century. Despite the overwhelming evidence of this methodical mass killing, to this day, Turkey continues to deny that genocide occurred. But today, as always, we speak with one voice. We will not forget. We will never forget. For tens of thousands of my constituents here in California's 28th District, achieving recognition of the genocide has been a lifelong struggle. It has also been a deeply personal mission for me as well. I have sat here in Glendale with survivors, been welcomed into their homes, listened to their stories of how their parents and siblings were murdered, how their property and the lives their families built were destroyed. I've watched them relive the pain over and over again with tears streaming down their faces. In 2019, for the first time in history, Congress passed a resolution that I've been carrying for almost 20 years and passed it by near unanimous margins, affirming the facts of the Armenian genocide. And last year, President Joe Biden cast aside decades of shameful silence by our nation to become the first sitting U.S. president to recognize the Armenian genocide. These historic milestones happened because of you, because of a strong and resilient Armenian diaspora. But today, again, the threat of annihilation hangs over the Armenian people, because today the Armenian people are still under attack, including those who have died in Artsakh, the thousands who were forced to flee unprovoked aggression by Azerbaijan and Turkey, and the many who remain prisoners of war or live in fear of another attack or invasion. We cannot allow these crimes against humanity to go unrecognized, nor can we fail to see the continuing danger to the people of Artsakh and Armenia, even as we see the onslaught against Ukraine. The United States must fully step into its role as a defender of democracy and peace around the world, and that includes in Artsakh and Armenia. We must not relent in our calls for the immediate, safe, and unconditional release of the remaining Armenian prisoners of war and captured civilians, for the end of U.S. assistance to the Aliyev regime, and for stronger efforts to secure more funding for Artsakh and Armenia. Now more than ever, we must seek to further strengthen and support Armenia and Artsakh. We demand their liberation, and we must not rest until safety, peace, and justice are achieved for our Armenian brothers and sisters abroad. I thank you.
I would now like to invite, well, before I do, allow me to also ask you to welcome with your applause from the Glendale Community College Board of Trustees, Dr. Armine Hagopian, Yvette Vartanyan-Davis, and Sevan Benlian. Please welcome them for joining us. Now I would like to welcome to the stage of the Alex, the Minister Consular of the Republic of Armenia, Nelly Saroyan.
Good evening. Honorable guests, distinguished members of the Armenian community, dear friends of Armenia, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we commemorate the victims of the Armenian genocide in Ottoman Empire. The pain of the immense human and territorial loss suffered by the Armenian people more than 100 years ago still echoes in our hearts, reminding us that the right of the Armenian people to live peacefully in their homeland was violated, first in Ottoman Empire and now in Artsakh. In 1915, The deliberate and pre-planned massacres and deportations of the Armenian population in Ottoman Empire marked the beginning of the cultural genocide, which continues to this day in Artsakh. Genocide is not only an organized crime that is meant to annihilate a nation, an ethnic group, and people who are different. This is an act against tolerance meant to eliminate history, culture, art, and knowledge. Thus, it is a much greater calamity, greater and a much more vicious crime than a just murder of the people. The denial of the Armenian history, falsification of historical facts, destruction of the Armenian cultural heritage, the policy of Armenophobia, glorification of perpetrators and assassinators laid the foundation for committing new atrocities, as a result of which today the Armenians of Artsakh face the threat of ethnic cleansing on their homeland. The recognition and condemnation of the crimes against humanity is one of the main pillars of their prevention in the future. As a nation that has survived genocide, Armenia initiated a process to take a level up the international cooperation, international efforts to strengthen the concept of prevention against mass atrocities through initiation of thematic resolutions on genocide prevention. In 2015, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution initiated by Armenia, which proclaimed December 9 as an International Day of Commemoration and Prevention of that crime. Dear friends, taking of this opportunity, I would like to reaffirm Armenia's deep gratitude to the United States and its people for their solidarity in the most brutal period of our history and for the recognition of the genocide. We are also grateful to all those Americans that continue standing by our side and voicing the importance of recognition and condemnation of the Armenian genocide by Turkey. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the Armenian diaspora worldwide, as their important contributions made over many years leaves me a feeling of gratefulness to each and every one of you. Սիրելի հայրենակիցներ, այսօր ոգեկոչում ենք 1915 թվականին Օսմանյան Թուրքիայում հայոց ցեղասպանության զոհերի հիշատակը։ Օգտվելով առաջին աշխարհամարտի իրողությունների ընձեռնած հնարավորություններից, Օսմանյան կայսրության պարագլուխները որոշեցին, որ հազարամյակներ շարունակ իրենց հայրենի հողում ապրող, արարող հայ ժողովուրդը այլևս չպետք է ապրի իր հայրենի հողում։ Հայոց ցեղասպանության անպատժելիությունը այսօր եւս ոգեշնչում է եւ միջազգային նոր հանցանքներ ծրագրողներին։ 2020 թվականի սեպտեմբերին Ադրբեջանի կողմից Արցախի դեմ սանձազերծված վերջին պատերազմը, որը ուղեկցվում էր պատերազմական հանցագործություններով եւ էթնիկ զտումների գործողություններով, ի ցույց դրեց, որ նախկինում իրականացված հանցագործությունների անպատժելիությունը անդառնալի հետևանքներ կարող է ունենալ։ Սիրելի հայրենակիցներ, մենք պետք է ապրենք ամենօրյա այն գիտակցումով, որ անմարելի պարտք ունենք 1.5 միլիոն մեր նահատակների հիշատակի առաջ։ Պետք է յուրաքանչյուր օր գործով եւ հայրենիքի շնացմամբ եւ զարգացմամբ արժանի լինենք նրանց զոհողությանը եւ վառ հիշատակին։ Շնորհակալություն։
I'd now like to invite up to the stage the founder of the Select Committee on California, Armenia, and Artsakh Mutual Trade, Art, and Cultural Exchange in the state of California, our state senator, Anthony Portantino.
Isn't it nice to have Artie Kasakian as the mayor of Glendale? I'm pleased to be here, and again, I want to acknowledge our honored clergy, the City Council of Glendale, and all of you for being here. Our wonderful Congressmember Adam Schiff. Let's give it up for Congressman Schiff one more time. He he was being very humble because President Biden does not recognize the genocide without Adam Schiff's advocacy all those years to make it happen. It is an honor to gather here with our friends in Glendale, solemnly to pay tribute to the 1.5 million Armenians, the hundreds of thousands of Greeks, Assyrians, and other Christians massacred by the Ottoman Turks between 1915 and 1923. The Armenian Genocide Commemoration this year is different from the past. We gather today heartbroken by the tragic continued Azeri aggression on the peaceful Armenian people and the blatantly illegal invasion of the Ukraine. These actions are painful reminders that history will repeat itself if the international community fails to recognize and hold perpetrators of mass atrocities accountable. 107 years after the Armenian genocide, Turkey and Azerbaijan continuously try to implement their genocidal agenda toward the Armenians in the Republic of Armenia and Artsakh. In 2020, we witnessed the human rights violations committed by Turkey-backed Azerbaijan forces during the 44-day war. I had the honor of visiting Artsakh in November. No one should have to go through 11 checkpoints to go to that wonderful country, and it was deeply affected my time there. I had the opportunity to witness the consequences of the unprovoked war. I saw destroyed homes, schools riddled in bullet holes, where children play in a backyard 200 yards away from an Azeri camp, hospital and churches leveled by Azeri shelling. In particular, in the village of Tagavar, I encountered the most resilient and strong people I've ever met. Their pride and their determination to live peacefully on that land was both inspiring and emotional. At the Lady Cox Rehabilitation Center, I observed a classroom of autistic children receiving loving care and spent time with war heroes who were dealing with the significant personal consequences of that war. Instead of healing from the trauma of genocide and focusing on rebuilding for future generations, the peaceful people of Artsakh have been forced to relive their memories as the cycle of intergenerational trauma continues. Given the continued aggression in Sunik and the unprovoked actions of on the Shushi-Berdzor Road, we know that the international community needs to act with humanitarian relief and support for the Armenian people who are facing a well-funded military with a very destructive intent. The state of California has a long positive relationship with the Republic of Armenia and Artsakh. Having passed resolutions supporting Artsakh's independence and establishing a sister state relationship with Sunik, we're home to a proud Armenian-American community, many of whom are children and grandchildren of survivors. And as I said, and as it's been commented, last year President Biden officially recognized the Armenian genocide, adding the United States to the list of countries that have declared the atrocities against Armenians an act of genocide. While Turkey may try to rewrite history, the United States and California and members of the international community will not forget this crime against humanity. So tomorrow, the state Senate will take up SR 82, reaffirming California's recognition of the Armenian genocide and designating 2022 in the month of April for its commemoration. So as we look to the future, I remain committed to building on our efforts to strengthen the partnership between Armenia and California and supporting our opportunities for mutual economic benefit through the trade office that has been referenced recently. When I think of the resilient Armenian people, a line from the poem, "We are few, but we are called Armenians," by Sebak comes to mind. Gank, pidi lingnenk, uder shang, shanadank. We are, I messed it up, I apologize. We are, we shall be, and become many. Let there be peace. Thank you and God bless. Adzvats orne. Shinora galutsun.
Senator actually took Armenian language classes at Glendale College, so he did. Now join me in welcoming to the stage our former mayor and current assembly member, Laura Friedman.
Good evening. It is wonderful to be able to be with you here again tonight. This is the day when Glendale comes together as one community like no other day of the year, and it is such a wonderful feeling that we're all able to come together again this evening. Now, I am honored to be able to represent the largest Armenian diaspora community in the state legislature, in the assembly. And you heard that last year, an incredible victory was earned by this community and by our Congressman Adam Schiff, with the Biden administration recognizing the genocide. But in case you think that that issue is over and wonder why we need to still have these events year after year, I want to tell you a little story of something that happened just last Thursday. Now, my friend and colleague, Assemblymember Adrien Nazarian, has introduced the resolution for the State Assembly to recognize the genocide, which will be taken up tomorrow. And he honored me by asking me to present that resolution in front of our Rules Committee, which is the first step to bringing that piece of legislation to the floor of the Assembly. I sat down and I presented the resolution, and when I was finished, a man came and he sat next to me to testify in opposition. He introduced himself as being from the Turkish consulate, and he launched into a 5 or 6 minute long hatred-filled diatribe trying to convince my colleagues to not bring that resolution to the floor of the legislature. When he finished speaking, there was no debate. There was no argument. I watched as my colleagues, one by one, said aye, 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 aye. Unanimously and with bipartisan support, that legislature was adopted to move that resolution to the floor of the Assembly. Now, yes. But the important thing is that I didn't say a word after he spoke. It was not my powers of persuasion that convinced anybody. It was you. It was your work year after year and day after day. It was your work lifting the stories of your ancestors, lifting up the stories of the atrocities that were committed, of fighting for justice and truth. It was that resonated because my colleagues already knew what the right side of justice was because of you, because of this vibrant, strong, resilient community, because of this beautiful community. And it is such an honor for me to be able to stand with you year after year. Thank you, and God bless.
And now, from the California State Assembly, someone that we have not all gotten to know yet, but we will very soon, as she will represent the other half of Glendale after the census reapportionment. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Assemblymember Wendy Carrillo.
Thank you and good evening. Buenas noches. It's very steep steps. Well, it's an honor to join you here tonight. My name is Wendy Carrillo. I proudly represent the current 51st Assembly District, which is right next door to Glendale, all the way from East Los Angeles to Eagle Rock and Echo Park. And after redistricting, I would be so honored to continue to represent South Glendale and the community that is thriving in this beautiful city. You know, as we take a moment tonight to mourn the lives lost, to honor and celebrate the resilience of the Armenian community, and to reaffirm history, I just want to share a little bit about how I came to know about the Armenian genocide. I was in college at Cal State LA in 2003. I had chosen to run for office. I became the Vice President of Finance for the Associated Students Incorporated at the university. And we found $12 million in the student budget for student programs that hadn't been used. And so we got together and developed a program and how we were going to use that money for the school. And one of the student organizations that came forward was the Armenian Students Association. And we put together the first ever Remember 1915 event at Cal State LA. Thank you. I was maybe somewhere around 22 or 23 years old, and I had never heard of what had happened to the Armenian community. I grew up in Boyle Heights in East LA, went to Roosevelt High School, know a lot of history about my own community, and I recognized at that moment, having been a formerly undocumented student in this country, having fled a civil war in El Salvador, we have Armenians in El Salvador, and I never knew why. I understood at that point. That is the importance of history, and it is the importance of why we must all learn about ethnic studies and how we all can come together to understand that we are one community. But I felt a loss at that point, and I felt ashamed that I didn't know that I had to be in college to be able to understand what had happened and how we were binded and joined together. And as we commemorate this evening, I can't help but think of a love poem that I would like to share with you today. I think about those students who made such an impact in my young life. And I am reminded of a love letter that John Adams wrote to his wife in 1780 when he was in France raising money for the Revolutionary War. And he wrote to his wife Abigail, and he said, "My beloved, the gardens of Versailles are beautiful, and I wish that I had the time to write it all and explain it to you, but I must get back to work because I must go study politics and war so that our sons have the right to study mathematics and philosophy, so that their children have the liberty to study art and music." That, my friends, is the promise of this nation, that no matter where you come from, what you look like, what language you speak, or what your legal status is, this nation belongs to all of us, not just a few. And at that moment in 2003 at Cal State LA, as I learned for the first time about the Armenian Genocide, and as I reflected on the 12-year civil war in El Salvador that brought me to this nation, I was just blown aback and taken aback by how much more we all have in common. And as we continue to move forward in these times of trepidation, we also get to honor who we are, where we come from, and the many different generations that it takes, that every generation gets to do something different and actually make it better for the rest of us. I'm honored to join you all here tonight. I am honored to celebrate and rejoice in the resilience of our community and the Armenian American community, and I look forward to what's ahead. Thank you all so much.
And now we'd like to invite up to the stage someone who has worked tirelessly for the Armenian community, helped found the Armenian Caucus in Sacramento, and someone who has worked to help secure state funding for Lark Musical Society. Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage Assemblymember Adrian Nazarian. There he is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the introduction. First and foremost, it's wonderful to be with all of you. It's an ironic thing to be saying on an evening like this when we're remembering our past and our losses, our tragic losses. But the last 2 years have been extremely difficult. It's been difficult for all of us. Forget about the pandemic. That's something that a lot of us know how to overcome, even though it was the first time in our lifetimes. But as Armenians who come from a very rich diasporan experience, we've all had to weather the different challenges, especially over the course of the last 100 years and 3 or 4 generations of our family's history. But the fact that we were not only in isolation, but then had a war, a devastating war, placed on Armenia and Artsakh at a time when the country was actually doing extremely well. It's been continuously a devastating experience over the course of the last 2 years. So it's great to be with all of you in person. One thing I did discover that over the course of the last 2 years, I'm extremely optimistic about our culture, our heritage, our people, our diaspora, and Armenia as well. Because one thing that I saw was the resilience of the youth. Regardless of the country they came from, regardless of the specific Christianity or Christian church they belonged to, regardless of political views and beliefs, many of them took to the streets, many of them took to the boardrooms of newspapers and magazines and news media outlets. Many of them took to the freeways and streets and anywhere they can get a forum or attention in order to bring the attention of the world to what was happening. I don't think we're going to fail, or nor is our history going to be written differently than what we want it to be, given what I saw from our youth. But one thing that I will also ask all of you to do, I was extremely proud that California stepped up last year and invested in 3 thoughtful places in order to preserve the Armenian history and culture and bring forward new leadership. It's important to invest in 3 of the specific things that the state did last year. First of all, in building a TUMO Center to build future Armenian leadership. Second, in Lark, to make sure that the culture is preserved and continue to be strengthened. And third, in the USC Institute of Armenian Studies, in order to make sure that the education of the Armenian culture and heritage and history continues. So this is my last year in the state legislature that I've been proudly representing the San Fernando Valley for the past almost decade, but the work will continue, and I would ask that all of you join my colleagues and in the future ensure that these investments continue to grow, specifically in these areas, whether it's cultivating new leaders, whether it's continuing to preserve the education of our rich history, or making sure that the culture, the very rich culture of the Armenian community continues to be showcased. And with that, it's wonderful to be with all of you here as we remember the tragic, solemn loss of life, and I look forward to the presentation of Lark and Maestro Barsumyan. Thank you.
And now, we ask you to sit back, reflect on the words that were shared with you this evening, as we share with you the music of Gomidas. In the meticulous, invaluable work of Gomidas, we hear the spirit and essence of an ancient people, an ageless people, heir to an ageless land. There, in the legacy of Gomidas, father of Armenian music, lies a gateway to some of the earliest expressions of the Armenian soul. We begin with 2 love songs set in the natural world, in the context of the Armenian highlands. The lovers tell their stories, and in them we can hear the relationship to the land, the landscapes, and the climate from which we sprang. On the northern east side of Armenia is the village of Lori, in one of the most emblematic works of Gomidas, who drew from the very mouths of the villagers their first songs. We hear the plowing song of Lori, a work song in which the singer can be heard in conversation with the beasts of toil through whom he tills the land. In this brass band arrangements, 12 instrumentalists reflect the playful and festive spirit of the Armenian gathering. First, the dance song, pulling the listener into the circle of celebration among the gathered, and second, a love song between two young, inflamed lovers. The boy, riding the frolicking, playful horse beneath him, read with the joy and passion of youth. The lover, beseeching the young girl not to take another, but to return again to him. In these two songs, setting a rustic scene, we hear Gomidas unfiltered. In their original arrangements, he captures the nearest expression of the peasants themselves, living in that specific time, in that specific place.
Go
Wardens of the land since time immemorial, a land granted by God. This is a story we told for millennia. Just over a century ago, the great calamity drove us from that land into the world, into diaspora, and forced a new dark chapter in the story. The beginning of our homelessness is what we mark this day, as Gomidas captures in this solo song, Without Home. The disconsolate heart, the frozen heart, harvestless ground. Gomidas brings us into the doleful character of the bereft and grieving soul, first of the people in a solo solemn dance song, and second of the land itself, robbed, cold, and covered in snow. We have the great privilege this evening of hearing the piano arrangements of these songs as rendered by the People's Artist of Armenia, recipient of the USSR Order of Honor and the St. Mesrop Mashtots Medal, and multi-honorary title holder, Madame Svetlana Navasartian. The question arises again, what next? In our future lies our character. How to build what's to come despite what's past. We have answered that in the last century by meeting our new neighbors where they are, learning their language, and thriving with and among them. In the quartet arrangement of two Gomidas songs, the epitome of Western expression, 4 soloists coming together in harmony, meets the heart of the Armenian penchant to gather, discuss, and comprehend. The youth still dance. In dance, we find one of the earliest gestural languages expressing the Armenian way of life. As such, dance has always been central and important to our cultural expression. Here, the lovers dance because to love is to live. This dance is followed by the ceremonial dance of the elder women in subtle, solemn gestures, communing with the universe. We speak in modern tongues, in modern ways, yet always to tell an ancient story. These jazz quartet arrangements present the dialogue of our modern artists with our eternal roots. We learn and adapt, and we always remember. In the voices of children can be heard our hope for continuance, the strength we leave behind. Out of their mouths we first hear an ode to a language, our respect for an ancient tongue. Second, we hear the homage rightly paid to the mother, a sacred and anchoring figure to the Armenian.
Մեծասկանչ դու լեզու ով հեշտ բարբար մայրական քաղցրահնչուն բարերուտ նման արդյոք այլ տեղ կան
դու որ նախ ինձ հնչեցիր նախ սիրո որ հեշտ խոսքեր այլ նախ ըս քեզ թոթովելս դերի մտքեն չէ ելեր
իմ մայրենի քաղցր լեզու կյաց անսասան կյաց հավետ կյաց միշտ լեզուտ հայկարժան կյաց ծաղկալից ծաղկավետ
Ով
We look forward, with one ear straining always to hear the voices from before. Now, we hear Gomidas himself, a voice captured briefly in time. He sings a ritornella, whose very structure is a call and response. Gomidas calls, and we, in the voices of the choir, respond. Ladies and gentlemen, the City of Glendale and the Lark Musical Society. Let's hear it for them one more time. Tonight was proof that the Armenian spirit will never be broken. When Gomidas was on his deathbed and had lost his mind to the horrors that he had witnessed, his student and close friend came to visit him. Gomidas saw him and glimpsed to ask, "Do you have my red rose?" Bringing a red rose would signify that his work continues and that the Armenian culture will never die. To that extent, we extend a red rose to our performers this evening who brought back the magic of Gomidas tonight. And we extend our deepest sincere gratitude to Maestro Vace Barsumian, who continues the legacy of Gomidas through Lark Musical Society. Lark has dedicated this evening's performance to the children of our community. So with that, I would like to invite, with your warm applause, to the stage Svetlana Navasartian, Movses Pogosyan, Ardashes Kartalyan, Gaine Avakyan, Louise Khachadurian, Talar Aslanyan, Victoria Simonian, Jonathan Wade, June Satin, and Julia Hinton. Give them all a big round of applause. And if I can ask to have Andy Torosian, Heidi, and committee co-chair Sevana Zadorian join me on stage to present these roses. I think everyone's just celebrating backstage, but we will give these roses to them. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The struggle for justice continues, but with your help and our collective work, we will get there. Thank you. Good night.